Professor of Energy Policy and Technology at Imperial College London and Director of the UK Energy Research Centre. On that subject, Professor, can I come on the idea of energy and energy researchers and resources? A lot of papers are saying that the North Sea now should be looked at again and a gas field could be ready to supply British homes and businesses by the winter, says Neil McCulloch, the Chief Executive of Adura, a company you probably know or know of. Would you concur with that, Professor? Good morning.
Good morning. Thanks for having me on. Well, I mean, in short, I wouldn't really concur with the North Sea, opening up more licensing being the solution to the current crisis. And the reason for that is the North Sea's been a declining basin for the last 25 years. Under the previous government, we had successive licensing of new oil and gas fields. Some of those have come online, many haven't, and the licenses were relinquished. So I'm not a geologist, but we can't overlook the geology, and we can't pretend that there's enormous amounts of new oil and gas in the North Sea that haven't yet been discovered, because it's simply not there. So I think we need to understand and keep in proportion what we might be able to get from the North Sea by reopening the licensing rounds. And I think, to be honest, it's a bit of a red herring in the current context.
So what measures should the government be looking at?
Well, I mean, I think the first thing that we need to be looking very seriously about is exactly it's a bit complicated how electricity prices work, but for historical reasons, electricity prices shadow gas prices. And that seems a bit nuts when we get nearly 70% of our electricity from a mix of nuclear and renewables. So I think what I would hope the government are looking at urgently is how we de-link the electricity price, or at least that part of electricity that we get from things other than gas, from the price of gas. And that can't be done next week, but it could be done in time for next winter.
You talk about not using the North Sea oil in the current crisis. Is there an argument that to wean us off dependency, this level of dependency on international markets, is something we might look at in the future?
Well, I mean, I think weaning us off fossil fuels is actually about weaning us off fossil fuels. So
we're always going to need some supply of fossil fuels, aren't we?
Yes, we'll always need some supply of fossil fuels. But I think as the role of fossil fuels falls, our reliance on it falls. And I think it's really important to be clear about how this market works. So yes, we could go in and we could explore for more oil and gas in the North Sea, but we're going to sell that at global market price, and the amount that we've got won't move that market price because simply isn't enough there.
But Professor, isn't it right that wind and solar power, and I'm reading this, I don't know, but wind and solar power cannot supply essential surge power at very short notice, known as dispatchable power? If that is true, then we can't rely solely on solar and wind because they can't provide it. If that's true?
We can't.
I mean, do you know this is that right, talking about what's called dispatchable power?
Yeah, it's right. I mean, we need to have a flexible sources of power. At the moment, we get that from gas. In the longer-term future, we'd be able to get that from energy storage and other sources. But that doesn't mean that for most of the time that we can't be getting cheaper electricity from our domestic homegrown renewables, because we can and we should.
Professor, thank you. Robert Gross, you're Professor of Energy Policy and Technology at Imperial College London, Director of the UK Energy Research Centre. I should tell you a government minister will be joining us later in the hour. We can put some of those points to him, and we shall.